You don't belong here. Those four words nearly silenced the blind black teenager whose voice would leave Grammy winner Camille Monroe in tears. When Jaylen Carter's audition went viral as a cruel joke, nobody knew they were mocking the son of a legendary soul singer. What happens when his true identity is revealed and justice arrives in the most shocking way possible? This story will give you chills and change how you see talent forever. Stay until the end. You won't believe what Camille Monroe says after hearing him say, "You don't belong here." Those four words echoed through the packed auditorium as 17-year-old Jaylen Carter carefully navigated toward the talent show sign-up table, his white cane tapping rhythmically against the polished floor of Lincoln High School's main hall. What happened next would shatter every assumption in that room. But first, let me tell you what they saw and what they completely missed. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta, and the annual talent show auditions had drawn the usual crowd of hopefuls, skeptics, and social media vultures ready to capture the next viral moment. Jaylen moved slowly through the buzzing crowd, his oversized thrifted hoodie hanging loose on his thin frame, earbuds dangling around his neck like a teenager's armor against the world. He looked exactly like what everyone expected, another kid trying to find his place in the unforgiving hierarchy of high school social politics. But here's what they didn't know, what only you and I will understand from this moment forward. 3 years ago, before tragedy rewrote his entire story, Jaylen Carter had been personally mentored by a Grammy-winning vocal coach. His voice had once filled recording studios across Nashville, and industry insiders whispered about the next generation soul prodigy. Then came the fire that took his sight, his home, and his mother, the woman who had been both his biggest supporter and his first music teacher. "Excuse me, sweetie, are you sure you're in the right place?" The voice belonged to Chloe Richardson, a blonde senior whose Instagram followers hung on her every word like gospel. She stood near the sign-up table with her perpetual sidekick, Trent Mitchell, both of them representing everything Lincoln High's arts program celebrated: wealthy, connected, and absolutely convinced of their inevitable stardom. Chloe's question wasn't malicious on the surface, but her tone carried that particular brand of condescension that American high schools perfect like a fine art. Jaylen paused, tilting his head slightly toward her voice. The conversation around them began to quiet as other students sensed drama brewing. This is how viral moments begin, not with grand gestures, but with small cruelties that reveal everything about who we really are when we think nobody important is watching. "I'm here for the auditions," Jaylen replied, simply, his voice carrying a quiet confidence that seemed to surprise even himself. He reached for the pen attached to the clipboard, his movements deliberate and practiced. Trent snorted, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "Dude, this is American Idol, not a pity party. They don't give participation trophies for trying really hard." This comment triggered a ripple of nervous laughter from the surrounding students, that uncomfortable sound people make when they know something's wrong but don't want to be the one to speak up. Chloe placed her manicured hand on Trent's arm, feigning concern, while her eyes gleamed with the anticipation of social media content. "What Trent means is maybe there are other activities that might be more suitable. Like, I'm sure the audio-visual club would love to have someone help with sound equipment." But then Jaylen did something unexpected. He smiled, not the defeated, apologetic smile they expected, but something almost mysterious. "Don't worry," he said, his voice carrying just a hint of something that should have made them pause, should have made them think twice about what they were dealing with. "I'm not here to win." The words hung in the air like a challenge wrapped in humility, and if Chloe and Trent had been paying attention, really paying attention, they might have noticed the way Jaylen's fingers unconsciously tapped out complex rhythms against his cane, or how his head moved slightly as if he was hearing music that existed only in his mind.
They had no idea that they were about to become part of a story that would change everything they thought they knew about talent, about worth, and about the dangerous game of judging people by what you see instead of what you hear. What happens next will leave you speechless. But I need you to do something first. If you believe that everyone deserves a chance to be heard, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me about a time when someone surprised you with hidden talent, and don't forget to subscribe because this story is just getting started. And trust me, you won't want to miss what Jaylen Carter is about to show the world.
Right at that moment, as Jaylen's mysterious smile faded and he turned toward the backstage area, the real cruelty began to unfold. What had started as casual mockery was about to escalate into something far more sinister. And the worst part? The adults who should have protected him were about to become part of the problem. The backstage area buzzed with nervous energy as contestants ran through last-minute rehearsals. But Jaylen found himself increasingly isolated in a corner, listening to the whispered conversations that people assumed he couldn't hear. That's the thing about being blind in a world that equates sight with awareness. People forget that your other senses become razor sharp, picking up every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every moment when they think you're not paying attention. "I can't believe they're actually letting him audition," came a voice from behind a nearby costume rack. "Like, what's he gonna do? Sing about being inspirational? This isn't a charity case competition." But it was Chloe who took things to the next level. She approached Jaylen with that fake sweetness that American teenagers weaponize better than any generation before them. "Hey, Jaylen, right? I just wanted to say how brave you are for putting yourself out there like this." Her voice dripped with the kind of condescension that makes your skin crawl. "I mean, we all need hobbies, right? Music can be so therapeutic." The word therapeutic hit like a slap. Jaylen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he remained silent, his fingers gripping his cane with just a little more force than necessary. Then came the moment that would haunt the hallways of Lincoln High for months to come. As Jaylen carefully made his way toward the water fountain, someone, and security cameras would later confirm it was Trent, deliberately stuck out his foot. Jaylen went down hard, his cane clattering across the floor as his body hit the ground with a sickening thud that made even the cruelest bystanders wince. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Trent exclaimed, his voice dripping with fake concern as he helped Jaylen up. "I totally didn't see you there. Are you okay?" The irony of his words wasn't lost on anyone within earshot, and several students pulled out their phones, sensing viral content in the making. Amy Rodriguez, a quiet junior from the theater department, finally found her voice. "That wasn't an accident, and everyone here knows it." But her words were quickly drowned out by Chloe's theatrical gasp. "Amy, that's such an awful thing to say. Trent was just trying to help. Accidents happen, especially when people can't see where they're going." The calculated cruelty of using Jaylen's blindness as a weapon left the entire backstage area in stunned silence. But the adults were about to prove themselves even worse than the students. Mr. Dawson, the faculty advisor who should have been protecting every student under his care, approached Jaylen with the kind of nervous energy that screams liability concerns over human dignity. "Jaylen, son, maybe we should reconsider this whole thing," Mr. Dawson said, his voice carrying the exhausted tone of someone who's given up fighting for what's right. "I mean, with everything that just happened, and considering the challenges you might face up there, maybe it would be better if you just observed this year. Get a feel for how these things work." The backstage area fell silent, except for the distant sound of someone practicing scales in an adjacent room. Jaylen stood there, dirt on his hoodie from the fall, his dignity under assault from every direction. And that's when someone in the crowd whispered the words that would change everything. "This isn't a therapy session, it's a talent show." They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully convinced a blind kid that he didn't belong in their world of spotlights and applause. What they didn't realize was that they had just awakened something in Jaylen Carter that had been sleeping since the night he lost everything.
And what happens next will prove that the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating someone who has already survived their worst nightmare. No one expected what happened next, because sometimes the universe has a way of turning cruelty into the very stage where miracles unfold. As Mr. Dawson's words hung in the air like a verdict, Jaylen Carter did something that would haunt every person in that backstage area for the rest of their lives. He straightened his shoulders, picked up his cane, and said 5 words that changed everything. "I'd like my audition now." The auditorium had that electric energy that only comes with teenage drama and social media anticipation. Students filled every seat, phones already recording, waiting for what they assumed would either be an inspirational moment or a cringe-worthy disaster they could share with their followers. The 3 judges, 2 teachers, and a local music store owner sat behind their table with the kind of polite resignation that comes from watching dozens of mediocre performances. When Jaylen's name was called, the giggles started immediately. Not loud, cruel laughter, but that subtle snickering that cuts deeper than outright hostility. It was the sound of people who had already decided what they were about to witness before the first note was even sung. Chloe leaned over to her friend Madison in the front row, her voice just loud enough to be heard by the surrounding students. This is either going to be really inspiring or really awkward. Either way, it's definitely going viral. Her phone was already positioned for the perfect angle, ready to capture what she assumed would either be a feel-good moment or prime meme material. Jaylen made his way across the stage with careful, measured steps, his cane tapping against the wooden floor in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. The auditorium's acoustics were perfect. Every tap echoed through the space, creating an unintentional drum beat that somehow felt more powerful than any grand entrance. Judge number 2, Mrs. Peterson from the English department, leaned forward with the kind of encouraging smile adults give when they're trying too hard to be supportive. "Take your time, sweetheart, whenever you're ready." Her tone was gentle, but it carried that unmistakable note of lowered expectations that made everyone in the audience unconsciously lean forward, preparing themselves for disappointment. The microphone stood center stage like a silver sentinel, waiting. Jaylen approached it slowly, his fingers finding the stand with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before, though nobody in that room knew just how many professional stages those same hands had graced in another lifetime. He adjusted the microphone height with the precision that should have been their first clue, then stepped back just the right distance, not too close to cause feedback, not too far to lose the intimate connection between sound and technology. These were the movements of someone who understood sound, who had been trained by professionals, but the audience saw only a nervous blind kid trying his best. The silence that followed was deafening. 300 students held their breath, phones recording, waiting for either triumph or disaster. Judge number 3 glanced at his watch impatiently, already moving on to the next audition. Then Jaylen lifted his chin, and something shifted in the atmosphere of that room. His posture changed. Gone was the hesitant teenager, replaced by something that belonged on professional stages. He gripped the microphone with the confidence of someone who had been born to hold it. And when he opened his mouth to sing just one line of Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come," the entire auditorium forgot how to breathe. The note that came out wasn't just sound, it was pure soul made audible, carrying decades of pain and hope and power that no 17-year-old should possess. And in that moment, even the ones who had mocked him forgot to breathe because they had just witnessed the kind of raw talent that doesn't just entertain, it transforms everyone lucky enough to hear it.
But the tragedy had not stopped yet. Because in today's digital world, even the most beautiful moments can be twisted into weapons of mass destruction. What should have been Jaylen's moment of triumph was about to become his darkest nightmare, proving that sometimes the cruelest cuts come not from strangers, but from the very people who witnessed your greatness firsthand. Within hours of that breathtaking audition, someone had recorded Jaylen's performance on their phone. But here's where the story takes a sinister turn that reveals the absolute worst of human nature. The video that started circulating on social media wasn't the full performance. It wasn't the soul-stirring moment that left an entire auditorium speechless. Instead, it was a carefully edited clip that cut off right before Jaylen's voice revealed its true power, showing only a nervous, blind teenager approaching the microphone. The edited version made it look like Jaylen had frozen on stage, unable to perform. Worse yet, someone had added a laughing emoji overlay and the caption, "When participation trophies go too far, this is what happens when we lower standards. Hashtag blind ambition, hashtag reality check, hashtag talent show fail." Trent Mitchell, still stinging from the memory of being proven so completely wrong, was the first to share it with his followers. "Not trying to be mean, but this is why some people should stick to what they're good at," he posted, adding crying laughing emojis that felt like digital daggers. Sometimes being supportive means being honest about limitations. Chloe went even further, creating a TikTok response video where she sat in her bedroom speaking directly to her camera with that practiced influencer sincerity. "Look, I feel really bad for him, and I think it's amazing that he tried, but we also have to be realistic about what talent actually means. I've been training in vocal performance since I was 7 years old, and it takes years of professional development to reach performance level. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is encourage people to find their actual strengths instead of setting them up for public embarrassment." The comments section became a battlefield of the worst impulses of anonymous internet culture. "Blind kid sings like a dying cat," wrote one user. "This is what happens when schools prioritize feelings over actual talent," posted another. Participation trophy energy became a trending hashtag, with Jaylen's edited video as the poster child for everything people claimed was wrong with modern American education. But the real devastation came when the video reached beyond Lincoln High School. National social media accounts picked it up, using Jaylen's image to make points about lowered standards and feel-good culture gone wrong. Conservative pundits used the edited clip as evidence that schools were prioritizing political correctness over excellence. Liberal commentators defended him, but in ways that somehow made everything worse, treating him like a symbol rather than a human being. Jaylen watched his phone blow up with notifications from accounts he'd never heard of, seeing his face attached to debates he'd never asked to be a part of. The boy who had just delivered one of the most powerful vocal performances in Lincoln High history was being used as a meme to represent failure. And that's when the backstory that explains everything finally emerges. The reason Jaylen's voice carries the weight of professional training, the reason his stage presence seems so natural, the reason that one line of Sam Cooke hit like lightning. 3 years ago, before the house fire that took his sight, Jaylen Carter wasn't just another teenager with musical dreams. He was the son of Melody Carter, a Grammy-nominated soul singer who had been grooming him for stardom since he could walk.
Melody Carter had discovered her own voice in the church choirs of South Atlanta, but she'd found her purpose in nurturing her son's extraordinary gift. Every day after school, she'd drive Jaylen to professional vocal coaching sessions in Nashville, sometimes making the 4-hour round trip 3 times a week. Industry insiders were already whispering about the next-generation soul prodigy who could channel decades of musical history through a voice that seemed impossible for someone his age. The fire changed everything. It happened on a Tuesday night in November, an electrical fault that turned their modest home into an inferno in minutes. Jaylen survived because his mother threw herself over him, shielding him from the falling beam that took her life and his sight in the same terrible moment. He spent 6 months in the hospital, learning to navigate a world without vision while grieving the loss of the only person who had ever truly believed in his gift. When he finally returned to school, music felt like visiting a grave.
Every note reminded him of her voice harmonizing with his. Every melody brought back memories of the dreams they'd shared. He'd stopped singing entirely, convinced that his gift had died with his mother in that fire. But here's what makes this story even more heartbreaking. The edited video that was destroying his reputation was preventing people from hearing the voice that his mother had died protecting. The very gift she'd sacrificed everything to nurture was being used as a punchline by people who had no idea what they were actually mocking. The cyberbullying reached its peak when a national morning show picked up the story, using the edited clip as part of a segment about participation culture in American schools. Jaylen became the face of a debate he'd never asked to join, his image flashing across television screens in millions of homes as an example of lowered standards and misplaced sympathy. Sitting in his bedroom, listening to strangers on television discuss his limitations and appropriate expectations, Jaylen Carter made a decision that would have devastated his mother's memory. He decided to quit not just the talent show, but school entirely. The voice that could have changed the world was about to be silenced forever by people who had never even heard it. The cruelest irony, while the internet debated his worthiness to perform, not one of them had actually heard him sing. They were destroying a gift they didn't even know existed, proving that sometimes the most dangerous enemies aren't the ones who hate your dreams, they're the ones who judge them without ever truly listening. If this story is breaking your heart the way it's breaking mine, I need you to hit that like button right now. Share your own experiences with being underestimated in the comments below, and subscribe to this channel because what happens next will restore your faith in the power of truth to cut through lies. Sometimes the darkest moments are just setting the stage for the most brilliant comebacks.
But the nightmare was far from over, because sometimes when you're already at rock bottom, people will still find ways to keep digging. What happened next would prove that institutional cruelty can be even more devastating than teenage meanness, and that the adults who should protect our most vulnerable students are often the ones who abandon them when the spotlight gets too hot. The school board meeting happened on a Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after Jaylen's audition had been twisted into viral ammunition. The Lincoln High conference room was packed with parents, teachers, and school officials, all gathered to discuss what they euphemistically called recent social media incidents affecting our educational environment. But everyone knew this meeting had one real agenda item: what to do about the Jaylen Carter situation. Chloe Richardson sat in the front row next to her mother, Dr. Sandra Richardson, who just happened to be the school board's vice president and one of the district's largest donors. This wasn't a coincidence. When your family's annual contribution could fund an entire arts program, your voice carries weight that goes far beyond normal parent concerns. "I want to be very clear," Dr. Richardson announced during the public comment period, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. "My daughter and her peers have worked incredibly hard to maintain the artistic standards that make Lincoln High's talent show one of the most prestigious events in the district. When we allow our standards to be compromised for the sake of political correctness, we do a disservice to genuinely talented students who have earned their places through years of dedicated training and achievement." The coded language was masterful. She never mentioned Jaylen by name, never said anything that could be directly called discriminatory, but everyone in that room understood exactly what she meant. This was how institutional racism operated in modern America, wrapped in concerns about standards and fairness and protecting our high-achieving students. Principal Davis, a man who had spent 30 years in education but had never developed the spine necessary to stand up to powerful parents, nodded thoughtfully. "We certainly want to maintain our reputation for excellence while also being inclusive. It's a delicate balance."
But then came the moment that would haunt Lincoln High for years to come. Chloe herself stood up, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine emotion, but was actually carefully practiced manipulation. "I just want to say that I think what happened to Jaylen on social media was terrible, and I feel really bad about it. But I also think we need to consider the impact this controversy is having on all the students who are trying to focus on their art instead of dealing with online drama. Maybe the kindest thing for everyone, including Jaylen, would be to help him find a different way to participate that doesn't put him in such a vulnerable position." The gasps from the few parents who understood what was actually happening were drowned out by murmurs of agreement from those who saw Chloe's words as compassionate wisdom rather than calculated cruelty. This was the particular genius of Chloe Richardson. She could destroy someone's dreams while sounding like she was trying to protect them. Mrs. Peterson, the English teacher who had been one of the talent show judges, tried to speak up. "If I may, I was there for Jaylen's audition, and I think people would be surprised by—" "Mrs. Peterson," Principal Davis interrupted smoothly, "I think we need to focus on moving forward constructively, rather than relitigating past events. The question before us is how to best serve all our students going forward."
The next morning, Jaylen found the letter in his locker. Official Lincoln High letterhead, signed by Principal Davis himself, but clearly written by lawyers who specialized in making discrimination sound like kindness. Due to the recent social media attention surrounding the talent show auditions and our concern for your well-being and privacy, we feel it would be in everyone's best interest to excuse you from participation in this year's event. We want to emphasize that this decision in no way reflects on your abilities or worth as a student, but rather represents our commitment to providing a safe and supportive learning environment for all students. The letter went on to offer alternative opportunities for artistic expression, including helping with backstage technical support, where your unique perspective could be invaluable to the production team. They were offering him the chance to be helpful behind the scenes, while the students who had mocked him took center stage. Amy Rodriguez found Jaylen sitting alone in the music room during lunch, the letter crumpled on the floor beside him. "This is insane," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "They can't do this. What they're doing is illegal, isn't it? This is discrimination." But Mr. Dawson, who had been standing in the doorway listening, stepped forward with the exhausted expression of someone who had given up fighting battles he couldn't win. "Amy, I understand you're upset, but sometimes we have to accept that the kindest thing is to step away from situations that have become too complicated. Jaylen, son, maybe this is actually a blessing in disguise. All this attention, all this controversy, it's not healthy for a young person. Maybe it's time to focus on other strengths, other ways to contribute." The words hit like physical blows. Even Mr. Dawson, who had seen Jaylen's talent firsthand, was now suggesting that it was easier for everyone if he just disappeared. "It's easier if you just step away," he said, and those words contained everything wrong with a system that prioritized comfort over justice, convenience over courage. That night, Jaylen sat in his bedroom, listening to old recordings of his mother's voice, considering a decision that would have broken her heart. The acceptance letter from the Georgia Institute for the Blind sat unopened on his desk, a pathway to a future where he could disappear from Lincoln High, from Atlanta, from everyone who had decided he was too much trouble to defend. The boy who had once been destined for stages across the world was ready to accept that maybe some dreams were too dangerous to pursue, that maybe the price of having a voice was higher than he could afford to pay.
Right at that moment, when all hope seemed lost and the forces of cruelty appeared to have won completely, something extraordinary happened that proves the universe sometimes has a way of ensuring that true talent cannot be silenced forever. What unfolded next would turn every assumption upside down and remind us all that real heroes don't always wear capes.
Sometimes they're quiet teachers and brave students who refuse to let injustice have the final word. Amy Rodriguez had never considered herself an activist, but watching Jaylen's dreams get systematically destroyed by people who had never even heard his real voice ignited something fierce inside her that she didn't know existed. While Jaylen sat in his bedroom contemplating surrender, Amy was in her computer programming class, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the focused intensity of someone on a mission to right a terrible wrong. She had kept the full, unedited recording of Jaylen's audition on her phone, not for social media, but because she'd recognized something magical when she heard it and wanted to preserve that moment of pure artistry. Now, as she watched the edited version continue to spread across the internet like a virus of misinformation, she realized she held the antidote in her hands. But Amy was smart enough to know that simply posting the real video wouldn't be enough. In the age of viral content, timing and presentation meant everything. She needed someone with credibility, someone whose voice could cut through the noise of teenage drama and adult cowardice. That's when she remembered her cousin Marcus, who worked as a junior talent scout for Pinnacle Youth Arts, a nonprofit organization that discovered and developed young performers across the Southeast. "Marcus, you need to see this," Amy typed in her message, attaching the full video file. "Everyone's talking about this kid like he's some kind of charity case. But I'm telling you, what I recorded will blow your mind. This isn't just good for a high school student, this is professional-level talent that shouldn't even exist in someone our age." Meanwhile, Mrs. Peterson was having her own crisis of conscience. The English teacher had been thinking about Jaylen's performance nonstop since the school board meeting. And the more she reflected on what she'd witnessed, the more convinced she became that she had heard something truly extraordinary. But it wasn't until she was grading papers that Friday evening that she made a connection that changed everything. Among her stack of essays was a research paper about influential soul singers of the 1990s. And there, staring back at her from a student's bibliography, was a name that made her heart stop: Melody Carter. Mrs. Peterson had been a huge fan of Melody's music during her college years, and she remembered reading about the tragic fire that had taken the singer's life. But what she hadn't known, what the media had kept private out of respect for the family, was that Melody had left behind a son. Her hand shaking, Mrs. Peterson pulled up old articles about the fire, cross-referencing dates and details until the picture became crystal clear. Jaylen Carter wasn't just any teenager trying to sing. He was the son of one of the most promising soul singers of her generation, a boy who had been personally mentored by Grammy-winning professionals before tragedy struck his family. The realization hit her like lightning. She had witnessed the musical legacy of Melody Carter living on through her son, and everyone around them was too blind to see it. That same evening, Marcus Rodriguez was sitting in his Atlanta apartment, initially planning to give his cousin's video a quick glance before moving on to his weekend plans. But 30 seconds into Jaylen's performance, he was reaching for his phone to call his boss at Pinnacle Youth Arts.
"Sarah, I need you to clear your schedule tomorrow morning," he said, his voice urgent with excitement. "I just found something that's going to change everything we think we know about undiscovered talent in this city." Sarah Chen, the executive director of Pinnacle Youth Arts, had heard Marcus make bold claims before, but something in his voice was different this time. "What are you talking about?" "There's a kid at Lincoln High who's been getting torn apart on social media because people think he can't sing. But Sarah, I'm sending you a video right now, and I need you to watch it immediately. This isn't just talent. This is the kind of generational gift that comes along once in a decade. And here's the kicker. I think this might be Melody Carter's son." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for several seconds before Sarah spoke again, her voice tight with controlled excitement.
Marcus, Melody Carter, was one of the most naturally gifted vocalists of the past 20 years if her son has inherited even a fraction of her ability. Sarah, he hasn't inherited a fraction. From what I can hear in this recording, he's inherited everything, and maybe added something uniquely his own on top of it. What happened next moved with the speed that only occurs when passionate people recognize something truly special. Sarah Chan didn't just watch the video. She called an emergency meeting of Pinnacle's Talent Development Board for Saturday morning. By Sunday evening, they had reached out to 3 major music industry contacts, including someone whose opinion could change not just Jaylen's life, but the entire trajectory of this story. That someone was Camille Monroe, the 3-time Grammy winner who had mentored everyone from Alicia Keys to John Legend, and who had been Melody Carter's friend and collaborator before the fire. When Camille saw the video that Sunday night, she didn't just watch it once. She watched it 17 times, tears streaming down her face as she heard echoes of her dear friend's voice coming through her son. Monday morning, while Jaylen was still contemplating his letter from the Georgia Institute for the Blind, while Chloe Richardson was planning her next social media post about maintaining artistic standards, while Principal Davis was congratulating himself on managing a difficult situation, Camille Monroe was picking up her phone to make a call that would shatter every assumption and restore justice to a story that had gone terribly wrong. "Is this Lincoln High School?" she asked when the receptionist answered. "This is Camille Monroe, and I need to speak with someone about a student named Jaylen Carter. I believe you're making a terrible mistake."
But the universe had other plans, because sometimes when powerful people finally decide to use their influence for justice, the whole world shifts in ways that leave everyone speechless. What happened next would prove that truth has a way of rising to the surface no matter how many people try to bury it, and that real talent doesn't just sing, it roars. The call from Camille Monroe's management team to Lincoln High School on Monday morning created the kind of chaos that only occurs when small-town institutions suddenly find themselves in the spotlight of national attention. Principal Davis, who had spent the weekend congratulating himself on quietly resolving the Jaylen situation, found himself stammering through a conference call with representatives of one of the music industry's most respected figures. "Miss Monroe has personally reviewed video footage of student Jaylen Carter's audition," explained her manager, David Kim, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making careers and breaking obstacles. "She has requested to serve as a guest judge for your upcoming talent show finals, specifically to evaluate Mr. Carter's performance. We understand there may have been some administrative confusion regarding his participation status." Administrative confusion. The phrase hung in the air like a diplomatic way of saying, "We know exactly what you did, and we're giving you one chance to fix it before this becomes a national story about discrimination in American schools." Dr. Sandra Richardson was in her real estate office when her daughter Chloe called, sobbing with a panic that cut through her usual composed manipulation. "Mom, you have to do something! Everyone's talking about how Camille Monroe is coming to our school specifically to hear that blind kid sing. People are saying we made a mistake. They're saying we don't know real talent when we hear it." For the first time in her daughter's life, Dr. Richardson found herself speechless. Camille Monroe didn't make public appearances at high school talent shows. The woman who had discovered some of the biggest names in contemporary music didn't waste her time on teenage auditions unless something extraordinary was happening. Meanwhile, Jaylen sat in his guidance counselor's office completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. Mrs. Williams, the counselor, was reading from a script that had clearly been prepared by the administration's legal team. "Jaylen, we've had some new developments regarding the talent show. It appears there may have been some miscommunication regarding your participation status. We'd like to invite you to perform in the finals this Friday evening."
Her voice carried the forced enthusiasm of someone delivering news they didn't quite understand themselves. Jaylen's head tilted slightly, that familiar gesture of someone processing unexpected information. "I thought you said it would be better for everyone if I stepped away." Mrs. Williams shuffled her papers nervously. "Well, sometimes circumstances change, and we always want to support our students' artistic endeavors when possible." But it was Amy Rodriguez who finally told Jaylen the truth. She found him in the music room during lunch, still trying to process the morning's confusing developments. "Jaylen, you need to know what's really happening. Camille Monroe is coming to hear you sing. The Camille Monroe. She saw the real video of your audition and she's personally requested to judge the finals just so she can hear you perform again." The silence that followed was deafening. Jaylen's fingers found the piano bench beside him, gripping it as if the entire world had just shifted beneath his feet. "Amy, are you sure? Camille Monroe is my mom's friend. She was at the funeral. His voice broke slightly as memories of that terrible day came flooding back.
She remembers you, Jaylen, and more than that, she recognizes what your mom saw in you all those years ago. Friday evening arrived with the electric energy that only comes when a small-town event suddenly carries the weight of much larger implications. The Lincoln High Auditorium was packed beyond capacity, with local news crews setting up cameras and social media influencers positioning themselves for the perfect angle. Word had spread through Atlanta's music community that something special was about to happen. Camille Monroe sat at the judges' table wearing a simple black dress and the kind of understated elegance that only comes with true confidence. When she spoke to introduce herself, her voice carried across the auditorium with the authority of someone who had shaped the careers of legends. "I'm honored to be here tonight, not just as a judge, but as someone who believes that real talent transcends every barrier we think we understand. Tonight, we're not just listening to performances, we're witnessing the future of American music." Chloe Richardson performed her carefully rehearsed rendition of a Beyoncé song, technically proficient but lacking the soul that separates good singers from great ones. Trent Mitchell delivered a competent cover of a John Mayer tune that showcased his guitar skills but revealed nothing about his artistic depth. One by one, the other contestants took the stage, each delivering performances that were perfectly adequate but fundamentally forgettable. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, performing last tonight, please welcome Jaylen Carter. The auditorium fell silent as Jaylen made his way across the stage, but this time the silence felt different. It wasn't the cruel anticipation of disaster. It was the hushed reverence that comes when people sense they're about to witness something extraordinary. Camille Monroe leaned forward in her chair, and for just a moment, her composed expression cracked to reveal raw emotion. She was about to hear the voice of her dear friend's son, the boy whose talent Melody was dying protecting. Jaylen adjusted the microphone with the same precision he'd shown weeks earlier, but now the audience understood what they were seeing. The movements of someone who had been trained by professionals, who belonged on stages like this. When he opened his mouth and began to sing Otis Redding's "A Change Is Gonna Come," the entire auditorium was transported. This wasn't just a performance, it was a declaration, a testament to the power of authentic artistry over manufactured prejudice. And Camille Monroe, tears streaming down her face, whispered the words that would change everything. "Melody, your baby boy is going to change the world."
Right at that moment, as the final note of Jaylen's performance hung in the air like a prayer answered, something shifted in the universe that would ripple outward far beyond the walls of Lincoln High School. What followed wasn't just applause. It was the sound of an entire community confronting the weight of their own prejudices and choosing to be better than they had been. The standing ovation began with Camille Monroe rising from her chair, tears streaming down her face as she clapped with the fierce pride of someone honoring a legacy. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. Students, parents, teachers, even the camera crews who had come expecting a feel-good local story, but instead witnessed something that would reshape their understanding of what talent actually looks like. But it was what happened after the applause that revealed the true power of Jaylen's voice to transform hearts and minds. Camille Monroe stepped onto the stage, her presence commanding the kind of respectful silence that only comes when greatness recognizes greatness. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in the music industry. "What you just witnessed wasn't simply a talented teenager singing a classic song. You heard the voice of someone who carries the musical DNA of one of the most gifted singers of our generation. Jaylen Carter is the son of my dear friend Melody Carter, and tonight he proved that talent doesn't just survive tragedy, it transforms it into something even more beautiful." The revelation hit the auditorium like lightning. Suddenly, every cruel comment, every dismissive laugh, every moment of institutional cowardice was exposed for what it truly was, a community's failure to recognize extraordinary gifts because they came wrapped in circumstances they didn't understand. Chloe Richardson sat frozen in her seat, her perfectly crafted Instagram persona crumbling as she realized she had spent weeks mocking the son of a Grammy-nominated artist. The girl who had built her identity around being Lincoln High's musical star was confronting the devastating reality that she had never even been in the same league as the boy she'd tried to destroy. Principal Davis found himself in the impossible position of trying to maintain institutional dignity while everyone in that room knew exactly how his administration had handled the situation. When a local news reporter approached him after the show asking about the school's support for students like Jaylen, his stammered responses would become a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis. But the most profound transformation belonged to the students themselves. Amy Rodriguez watched in amazement as classmates who had shared the cruel memes just days earlier now approached Jaylen with genuine awe and respect. The same teenagers who had laughed at the edited video were now posting the full performance with captions like, "I can't believe we almost missed this," and "This is what real talent looks like." However, justice demands more than just recognition. It requires accountability. Within 48 hours, the school board announced a comprehensive review of their anti-bullying policies and procedures for handling student conflicts. Dr. Sandra Richardson quietly resigned from her position, citing the need to focus on family priorities. Her departure wasn't announced with fanfare, but everyone understood the connection between her daughter's behavior and her sudden exit from educational leadership. Chloe herself faced consequences that extended far beyond high school social dynamics. The Performing Arts Conservatory, where she had planned to study the following year, rescinded their acceptance offer after the full story became public. Her social media accounts, once filled with confident proclamations about artistic standards, went silent as the weight of her actions settled in. Trent Mitchell's response revealed something more complex about the nature of redemption. Rather than retreating into defensive anger, he did something that surprised everyone. He publicly apologized, not with the calculated language of damage control, but with the raw honesty of someone genuinely confronting their own cruelty.
"I was wrong," he posted in a video that would be shared thousands of times. "I was wrong about Jaylen, wrong about what talent looks like, and wrong about what kind of person I wanted to be. I can't take back what I did, but I can commit to being better and to making sure this never happens to anyone else." But the most beautiful transformation was yet to come. 3 months later, Camille Monroe announced the establishment of the Melody Carter Foundation for Young Artists,
a scholarship and mentorship program designed to identify and nurture extraordinary talent regardless of students' circumstances or backgrounds. Jaylen became the Foundation's first scholarship recipient, earning a full ride to the Berklee College of Music. The Foundation's mission statement, written jointly by Camille and Jaylen, captured everything this story represented. True talent doesn't announce itself with privilege or presentation. It whispers in unexpected voices, shines through unlikely circumstances, and reminds us that our greatest artists often come from places we are not looking. The Melody Carter Foundation exists to ensure that no young person's gifts are silenced by prejudice, poverty, or the simple failure of adults to listen with their hearts instead of their assumptions. 6 months after that life-changing talent show, Jaylen Carter performed at the Apollo Theater in Harlem as part of a tribute to classic soul music. The audience included music industry legends, fellow artists, and hundreds of young people who had heard his story and found the courage to pursue their own dreams despite the obstacles they faced. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when he dedicated his performance to everyone who has ever been told they don't belong on the stage they were born to command. The story of Jaylen Carter reminds us that in a world quick to judge and slow to listen, our greatest responsibility is to hear beyond what we see, to recognize that extraordinary gifts often come wrapped in ordinary packaging, and that sometimes the voices that need amplifying the most are the ones that others are trying hardest to silence. He didn't need sight to see his worth. He just needed someone to stop looking down on him long enough to really listen. And when they finally did, they discovered that the greatest music doesn't just entertain, it transforms everyone brave enough to let it change them. What would you do if someone like Jaylen stood in front of you today? Would you judge first, or would you listen with the kind of open heart that recognizes greatness regardless of how it's packaged? If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and join a community that believes every voice deserves to be heard. Because somewhere out there, another Jaylen Carter is waiting for someone brave enough to truly listen.
Here's the truth that Jaylen Carter's story teaches us. In a world obsessed with appearances, we've forgotten how to truly listen. I've spent years in the music industry, and I've seen countless talented artists overlooked because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of what success should look like. But here's what separates the legends from the forgotten. Real talent doesn't need perfect packaging. It just needs someone brave enough to hear it. Jaylen's voice didn't change that night at Lincoln High. Our willingness to listen did. His mother, Melody, always said that music reveals who we really are when the spotlight hits us. Some people, like Chloe and the school administration, showed us how fear and prejudice can make us cruel. Others, like Amy and Mrs. Peterson, proved that courage often looks like one person refusing to stay silent when they witness injustice. The lesson here isn't just about music, it's about humanity. Every day, we encounter people whose gifts are hidden beneath circumstances we don't understand, whose potential is wrapped in packages we're too quick to judge. Jaylen's story reminds us that our greatest artists, leaders, and innovators often come from the places we're not looking, speaking in voices we're not expecting to hear. The next time someone stands before you, whether it's in a classroom, a job interview, or just a conversation on the street, remember Jaylen Carter. Remember that extraordinary gifts rarely announce themselves with fanfare. They whisper through broken voices, shine through unlikely circumstances, and wait for someone with the wisdom to listen with their heart instead of their assumptions. If this story moved you the way it moved me, if it reminded you to look deeper and listen harder, then hit that like button right now. Share your own story of being underestimated or discovering hidden talent in someone unexpected. I read every comment, and your experiences inspire the stories I tell. And if you believe, like I do, that every voice deserves to be heard,
Subscribe to this channel for more stories that will challenge how you see the world and remind you of the extraordinary gifts hiding in ordinary places. Because somewhere out there, another Jaylen Carter is waiting for someone brave enough to truly listen.